Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the final episode of Music Theory for Electronic Music Producers. In this episode, we will be looking at arrangement. Building on where we left off in the last episode on harmony, we currently have a number of disconnected musical elements. And in this episode, we want to discuss how we can go about connecting these elements into a coherent whole. But before we discuss arrangement in music, I want to draw an analogy to writing. When writing, we use letters as the fundamental units of text. By putting together different letters, we can create words. By combining different words, we can create entire sentences. And following the same logic, we can create paragraphs from sentences, chapters from paragraphs, and books from chapters. Let's use this analogy to writing to analyze our melodic example from episode 2 on melody, which was this one. Or here we also have it played in a piano. So we can think of the notes of our scale as the letters of our music, motifs as the words, and finally phrases as the sentences of our music. Following this logic, by putting multiple phrases together, we can create a section of music, which would be analogous to a paragraph in writing. So how can we go about building an entire section out of our single phrase? The simplest way to achieve this would be to simply repeat our phrase multiple times. So let's do that. Let's just repeat it a couple of times. And let's listen to that. However, you might have noticed that just repeating the same thing over and over again gets quite boring pretty fast. So in order to avoid boring the listener, we can use another trick, which is to imitate our music instead of just repeating it. So when we use imitation, we mean that we create a slight variation of our phrase. And by using imitation instead of repetition, we can keep a sense of coherence in our music, but also avoid the danger of boring the listener by repeating the same musical ideas too many times. So let's apply this idea to extend our musical phrase to a small section. So I'm going to take this part here, I'm going to make it unique. And I'm just going to change it up just a little bit. And let's listen to what this sounds like now. So we can continue using this idea of imitating instead of repeating to continue building our music. So for example, another very useful trick is to use filters or to change volume. So for example, we could filter the frequencies of our music to create a small introduction. So I'm going to put a filter, a telephone filter, which only leaves out the middle frequencies. And I'm gradually going to open that filter. And we get something which sounds a bit like an introduction. Another useful trick if you're working in FL Studio is you can use Alt and T and you can create a marker. So for instance, I could call this intro and I can do the same trick again. And I could call this instrumental, for example. This is useful if you want to keep a better overview over the structure of your music. So this here sounds a bit empty in my opinion. So I'm gonna remove some elements but keep a bit more of them. So again, let's make this unique. And let's go remove some of the elements like this. And we can also create a variation in the rhythm, for example. This sounds like a nice transition to get into this part of the song. So here again, we can use a marker to give this a name. And this is going to be a verse. So here we can use the same idea of using imitation instead of repetition. So let's first repeat this pattern. And then again, we're going to make it unique and go change up our melody a little bit. Again, here we could use a filter, for example. So let's close the filter here again a little bit. And then we would probably get into something which is more like a chorus, so like the main hook of our song. So again, let's take this. Let's just copy it. Let's put a new marker here. Let's call it chorus. Oh, that was wrong. There we go. And let's change the drums here. And again, let's create a variation. So let's take a listen to what this entire thing sounds like right now. So this could be the basis of our song structure. So as you can see, I have a couple of parts already in here. And there are a couple of sections that you typically find again and again in pop music and in electronic music. So for example, in pop music, the sections that you will typically find are a verse, which tells the story of the song. Then you have the chorus, which is the hook of the song, and it's usually also the loudest and most intense part of the music. There's very often an intro or an outro to introduce key musical elements. And another element which I don't have right now is there's also very often a bridge. And a bridge is an element of music which fundamentally deviates from everything before it. And the reason why you would use a bridge is to break up some of the monotony and surprise the listener. So typically in music, the typical way that you would arrange a song is you start with an intro, you have a verse, followed by a chorus, followed by a second verse, the chorus again, the bridge and the chorus, and finally an outro to end the song. Now in electronic music, you would often have different names um, to say the same things. So, for example, very often instead of a chorus, you would call it a drop. And instead of the verse, you could have the breakdown in electronic music, which is a um, reduced version of the chorus, which very often serves a similar purpose to the verse in pop music. So, in that sense, music structure in electronic music and pop music is very similar. So that's what I got for you today. This was the final episode in the series Music Theory for Electronic Music Producers. I hope you enjoyed the fourth and final episode on arrangement. I will finish the song and hopefully upload the final result sometime next week. If you have any ideas for future content that you want to see, feel free to leave a comment. Thank you very much for watching and take care.